Alright, in this video, this is the second part of the kinesthesis study. This is where you're going to be working with a new scene. You're going to be given a series of images and an audio file that you're going to be working with. Now, this is something that we haven't done yet, but the idea is working with an audio track in After Effects allows us to animate things with a rhythm and a pace, and you get this ability to time things based on an audio track. And this is really important in animation, that the timing flows very well with your audio. So just like we did in the first setup, we're going to bring in images and we're going to bring in our audio file as assets into our scene. So I'm going to save my file into this folder. You should be working off your desktop, not your graphics server, not off a flash drive, just off a desktop. So here I am in After Effects. My composition settings are the same. I've got 2 seconds on my timeline here. I'm going to be giving it a title, Candy Kinestasis, 640 by 480, and background of black. And so that's the way I have things set up. I'm going to create an images folder, and I'm going to create another folder called audio. And so into my images folder, I'm going to say Control I and import. I'm going to go back to my desktop, and I'm going to find my kinesthesis lab, and I'm going to choose all of these pictures here, and I'm going to bring them in as a kind of a group for my images. So there's all the images. They're not a sequence, so I'm not checking that. I'm going to say OK. There's all my images. Into my audio, I'm going to hit Control I and import my audio file here, kinesthesis music. Say open, and it's going to bring that in as a layer. As another element. So I want to first talk about the audio element here, so that you can see some of those basic things. We talked already about moving the images around, so you know how to. You can check these images and look at them and choose how to move things around with them. But what you haven't worked with yet is the audio. So like anything, I'm going to bring it down into my composition, dragging it and dropping it here into my composition. Now if I select on an item, it gives me some information about it up here. So this element, so if I select this image, it says it's 400 pixels by 400. That's kind of small. This one is 400. This one is 1600 by 987. And if I select this, it tells me it's 4 minutes, 6 seconds, and 14 frames long. And it's in 16-bit stereo. And so that's important information to know how long that is. Now that's longer than my composition, and that in this particular case is fine with me. Now one of the first things you're going to realize is that when I put this layer down here, I want to make sure that it's lined up. I'm going to hit my left square bracket to make sure it's lined up at the very first frame. And if I was to just go up here and press play, it's going to play across the timeline, but I don't hear anything. I'm wearing my headphones. There's nothing coming out. Well, that's because when you hit the play key, it doesn't calculate or render the sound. Now, if I was to play use the RAM preview and play it, you can hear that now it's playing it. Well, that's great. I'm going to hit escape. That's great, but now I can't see anything. So here's what After Effects allows for us. It actually has attributes. If you go down and twirl down the attributes, you're going to see that it has audio levels. This is the volume. Even though it says 0 decibels, it actually has volume, as you could hopefully hear. Now, it also has a waveform, which allows me to see the waveform of the music. Because I can't see anything, but I can see this. And so if I was to scrub over this as is, I still don't hear anything. However, when I hold down the Control key and then scrub, you hear something. Now I'm going to try to make it so you can hear it. And so as I'm scrub along in the timeline, I can get a feel for it. If I zoom in my timeline, I can see my waveforms a little bit better, and I can see specific key breaks in the audio track. One thing to realize is that you can keyframe the audio level. So I can actually turn down the sound, so there's no sound, or turn up the sound to be great big. Notice that as I turn things down and turn things up, the waveform is responding. So very little or 0, and then whenever it's set to 0 decibels, I can see its audio form. And so these are very important elements to be considering. And so I can see then the different beats. If I scrub across here, so here's a significant beat. So if I wanted something to show up on this beat, so I hear it's a little too choppy when I do it like that. So I hear a do, do, do. So if I wanted an image to appear right on this beat, let's say I go, and I'm going to keep this where I can see it. I'm going to bring down an image. Let's say I bring down, doesn't matter so much. I really like these, some of these chocolate truffles. So let's say I bring in a chocolate truffle, and I want it to appear on this beat. So here's the audio. So this pulse right here is where I want this image to appear. So I need to hit that mark slightly ahead, or slightly behind, or slightly ahead. So I'm going to go back 1 or 2 frames. And this is where I want my opacity channel. Oops, not that. I'm going to undo that. Go back to where I was. So this is the beat. I'm going to go back 2 frames. And this is where I want this. I'm going to pull this back. So this is where I want the transparency to be at 100, and then I'm going to go back a couple frames and go to 0. So I want this to feel like it hits right on that beat. And I'm going to adjust it till it gets to feel right. So I'm going to narrow my workspace by drawing in these elements here. And I can either use the shortcut in, the N key, and the begin, or the B key, to define the beginning and end. I want this to end here. And then if I use I'm going to scale that up a little bit so that it's not revealing. So I'm going to do this. Okay, I don't want to go crazy, so I want to give myself a little bit more room and feel the timing of that. So I have that then kind of snapping into place right at that time. So I kind of have it popping in, which is pretty fast. And I might want to do that. So da 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 da. So I might go da. So that's da. I'm going to try to find that next beat. So somewhere right about here, I'm going to try to find that next beat. So right about here, I want to change my values here. So I think I'm going to have it transition and then go 1, 2, 3 to out. And I want it to be on D. So I want another image to pop into position right here. So I'm going to bring in another one, maybe another truffle somewhere. Here's some more. I'm going to try to hit that beat. Now I'm going to be constantly kind of feeling this out. Okay, that's annoying how what it's doing here. This is pretty annoying. So this is pretty, I'm going to turn up the volume a little bit so maybe I can see this a little bit more clearly where these beats are. Here we go. So here's another one. I think I'm going to use this beat. That's a little bit too difficult to try to hit, so I'm going to try to, oops, no, I moved the wrong layer. I'm going to move this one down here to this point. So there's another high point. So I want this to transition right there and reveal this next one. So I'm just going to kind of go with that. There we go. I hit that right on the beat, and so I want to make sure that feels right. There we go. All right, it's a little loud, so I'm going to turn that down, but I wanted to be able to see kind of that waveform a little bit. Go back to 0 so we can kind of see that again. Then I'll add another one at the next change. So there's another change right about here. It might be at this point, so I'm going to scrub through this a little bit. Nope, that's a high note. So you gotta kind of just have some patience when you're working with this. So here's that change. Right there. So this point right here is where I want to put the next mark or the next image. So with this one, transparency, I might put in a keyframe there and move back 1, 2, 3 and add another keyframe. Change this one to 0. So I have this quick transition, and then I'll add another chocolate. Maybe these guys. Maybe I'll slap these guys in and make a real quick kind of broad, yeah, nice pan. Now I'll add some of the other movements in just a little bit, but I'm just trying to rough in the timing here. All right. I'll see how that feels. All right. So that feels pretty good. I'm going to check it one more time. Okay. All right, so that's not bad. Now I can then add my additional movements. I got my kind of my reveal, my timing, and now I can add some of those subtle movements on that. So I can change my anchor point if I will. I've kind of got some scale changes, so I might have just scale some of these in just a little bit. Those are very easy to do. So I'll keyframe my scale so that when this is here, before it fades out, it just kind of gets a slightly bigger, you know, just slightly bigger. This is some very simple movements here. I might move this one just slightly, maybe just slightly to reveal this one down here. So the anchor point here might start moving, you know, at this point. And then as it's on the screen and before here, I might move it over and up a little bit. Some just to get some real simple movements. Maybe not too much. I want to make sure I didn't move it too much. Yeah. Alright, and what I want is I don't want there to be this, when it comes on the screen, then it starts to move. So I'll back this off a little bit. So what that's going to give me the feeling of things in motion already before they are visible. So they're already moving. This is already moving, and then this one I'm gonna also just scale it up. So from here, maybe I want to end, you know, maybe with this heart. Maybe I might want to end with the heart so I could give some subliminal messages here. So I might have my anchor point. So my anchor point's here in the beginning, and then when I end, maybe I want it to be here, maybe right on this heart, dead in the center. And then I'll also have a scale, something like this, and then I'll go back to my keyframe. I think, oops, undo that. Go back to that keyframe and then change the scale down a little bit to, like, it was 100 and something. Can't see it, but it'll change over time. So it gets bigger and over time. And I might also back those off so it's slower. I can test it out. A lot of this stuff is just going to be kind of get a feel. And I think that moves a little too fast for my taste in this particular element. So what I might do, watch this, is I might say let's just move a little bit from here, and I'll put a keyframe in. Watch, I'll drop in a keyframe right there. Oops. Right there, and then I'll get rid of these two, and then I'll drag these two off a little bit, and then I get this nice kind of slower movement. All right. So once you have that basic idea, you're going to be making a longer animation with a lot of images with just slow transitions over the top of them. And so you can use different elements. You can try rotating things. Maybe I want to rotate this one a little bit over time. Give it a little bit of a, maybe at this point here, I want it to be at this location. But then when I go back, maybe I give it just a slight bit of a rotation to the left or something, and then when I see it, it rotates in like so. Then I want to add in my easing in and my easing out, right? So I want to ease into those positions because the easing out is invisible. So I get that nice subtle easing in and easing out. Now, when I'm finished with my animation here, I want to render this thing out, and that's the next video. Is going to talk about rendering out with audio and the attributes of that. So make sure you're able to set your keys, and you've got a nice animation that has 2 minutes of animation, very slow, very deliberate, but it doesn't have to be slow. It's going to be in pace with your music, and that you've shown that you're trying to hit those beats. So here's what I've got. Alright, so in the next video we're going to talk about how we take this movie that we've created in After Effects and export it out as a QuickTime film.